Hey, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth.
On Now You Know.
So, Jesse, there is a way that you can reduce your carbon emissions, and I don't think you've ever thought of it before.
Driving an electric car.
No, you think of that all the time.
Okay, going vegan.
Yep, that's definitely a way you can reduce them, but that you've already thought of that. Well, I guess it wasn't fair of me because you haven't thought of it. But our guest today has thought of it. This is Saasha Celestial-One, and she is the co-founder of an app called OLIO. So let's find out if this can truly reduce your carbon footprint in a way that you didn't think. Thank you, Saasha, for joining us today. You have an app that is going to somehow cut my CO2 in ways that I may never have thought of. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. Well, it's really easy. 10%, nearly 10% of global carbon emissions come from food waste. So that's perfectly good food that's just not being eaten. And half of all food waste takes place in our homes. So if we as individuals reduce our household food waste, we can have a dramatic effect on global carbon emissions. So my app is called OLIO. It's really simple. It basically is the modern equivalent of what humans have been doing for thousands of years. It connects neighbors in a community to share good food with each other so we can feed bellies and not send good food to landfill.
So, Jesse, you look a little skeptical there.
It seems a little hard to believe that such a huge portion of global carbon emissions could come from food waste when, we spend so much time talking about tailpipe emissions. So where does all of this CO2 come from when we're talking about food waste?
So the year before last, you may have heard of Project Drawdown. It was a massive global coordinated effort where 100 of the world's leading climate scientists came together and they stack ranked all of the different solutions to climate change. And they ordered them in terms of if we fix them, what impact it would have on the climate crisis. And food waste came in at number 3, well above, for example, electric vehicles and solar power and all of the typical things that one might think of as big systematic changes that we could make. And that's because the food system as a whole is responsible for almost a quarter of all global carbon emissions, everything from the farming to the harvesting to the manufacturing and the shipping and all of it combined. And when we throw away a third of the food that we grow, which we do globally, we're also throwing away those carbon emissions. So it's a bit of a double whammy. But also what happens is that when food goes to landfill, it goes in a black trash bag and it decomposes. It's buried on top with other trash and it decomposes without access to oxygen. And it creates this toxic stew which releases methane, which we all hear about when the cows are farting. But actually, we know it's a very toxic greenhouse gas and it's made by food waste. So that's how it happens.
And so how will OLIO help with this?
Of course, when you're thinking about the climate crisis, you need to have big regulatory and systematic changes in place. But I think it's all too easy to overlook what impact we can have as individuals on a day-to-day basis, thousands of times a day when we make those micro decisions. And often a micro decision that yesterday I had a delivery from our online supermarket and they brought me 2 loaves of bread. And I looked in the freezer and I thought, you know what, I already have some frozen bread. I don't need 2 loaves of bread. So I took a picture, I put it on the app, and an hour or 2 later, someone came by, they picked it up. What that means is that they got a free loaf of bread. I said hello to Gwyneth, and she didn't buy a new loaf of bread at the grocery store. So when you take if you look at household food waste, the average American family wastes over $2,000 worth of food every year. So that's worth a really good holiday or, a brand new wardrobe. But because it happens in small chunks, we don't really notice it and we aren't able to put the dots together. But by tackling our in-the-home food waste, we not only, can help reduce our food waste and carbon footprint, we can also just live a nicer life because we're doing something nice for other people or benefiting from the niceness that other people, nice actions other people have taken towards us.
In this country, we do a lot of food drives. They're very popular, especially around the holidays, where we're asked to go through our pantries, clear out, some things that have been sitting there for too long, bring them down to a food pantry or a food drive, put them in a bin. And it seems like when you go shopping, you just pick up another can of lima beans or something to give to that drive. And it seems very removed. Like it just feels like I'm putting this into this container. I don't know where it goes. I never see anybody, and I don't feel connected to it at all. Tell me more about, because I was really intrigued by what you just said about OLIO. You took a picture and you met somebody. So tell me more about that relationship.
Well, first I would say I know where that food goes because when I was a kid, my mom would be one of the recipients of those, and we would just get a random box, right? I grew up in a vegetarian household, so there'd always be some meat things in there we didn't know what to do with. But obviously, she would go around and give them out to her neighbors, to our neighbors. But those food drives are incredibly important, especially in a place like the United States, which has less of a institutionalized support system for people who are in vulnerable situations. But the reality is that people can't live off of tins of food and packets of food, right? People need fresh food, A. And B, if you're thinking about helping people who are in food poverty, there are more dignified ways to make sure that people's nutritional needs are met than the process of a food drive, which is a very visible process of who has food and who does not have food and a transfer of that value. The nice thing about just a neighbor-to-neighbor food sharing app is that I don't know if Gwyneth needs bread. In fact, I suspect she doesn't, but it's not up to me to judge. She was willing to walk around the corner and pick up a loaf of bread after I had too much, and that's all I need to know. And in that process, I've preserved, we're just simply two considerate neighbors. We're just taking an extra 30 seconds out of our day to make sure that something that went through a very long food supply chain to arrive at our doorstep, when you think about it, make sure that it doesn't just go straight in the food waste recycling bin.
I feel like there's two kinds of viewers right now who are watching this. There's a viewer who's just started to type in Olio and found the app and is like, cool, it's in my area, I'm going to start posting and using. And then there's the viewer who's typed in Olio and they're looking at it and they're like, there's no one in my area, which is true for Jesse and I. In our particular part of the world, unfortunately, there's no one within a close radius that's part of Olio as well. And so for those people, what can they do? Because they're probably awesome, concerned viewers watching right now who want to use this app, but they're like, there's no one around me. Is there a way to jumpstart or kickstart their community into using the app?
Absolutely. And just so we're a tiny team of people. We would not be where we are now, which is with nearly 2 million users. Although, to be fair, most of them are concentrated in a few geographies such as California, Mexico City, the United Kingdom, Singapore, without having grown through our grassroots volunteer program, which is how we've grown. So we've had over 40,000 people from all over the world ask that exact same question. Crap, there's no one near me. Okay, I recognize it's a chicken and egg situation. I can sit around and wait for, whichever one comes first to come, or I can get the ball rolling. And what we do is we empower people to do that by providing them with sort of a step-by-step playbook, basically, for want to get things going in your neighborhood. Here's what you need to do in this order, and here's all the materials, support and mentorship you need to go about and get that done. And in that way, we have micro communities just all over the world where 1 or 2 or 3 people have gotten together, and then they've, for example, printed off a bunch of flyers, or they've sent a press release to their local TV station, and they've done sort of a bunch of hyperlocal marketing activities to spread the word. At the most basic level, in order for Olio to work, you need 2 things, supply and demand, because it's a marketplace for free for food. So you just need to spread the word, right? Get 100, 200, 300 people to download the app, and then you need to get some portion of them to all list something more or less at the same time. Because when someone lists something, when someone shares, it sends a push notification to the people nearby that says, hey, Zac has just shared a loaf of bread, or Saasha shared some homegrown tomatoes, etc. And that's what gets the kindling. That's the kindling, is that activity. People come back to the app. And then you just get a certain amount of kindling. And then, to be honest, usually around 1,000 users within, a certain sort of distance that feels like an easy walk or drive or cycle ride. And once you get that, then people, if I'm sharing once or twice a week and someone else is collecting once or twice a week, you have enough activity that it's self-sustaining.
For those people who are interested in doing that, who are seeing on their app that basically there's no one else around them, but they know that, there is excess food, and obviously there's demand for food we eat every day. Where can they go to get this help and this information?
Well, right in the app, in the upper left-hand corner, there's a hamburger menu. If you touch that, it should say volunteer or get involved. Or our website, which is OLIOEX, which is short for Olio Exchange, olioex.com. There's a section that says get involved. We've made it as easy as humanly possible for people to volunteer.
Now, tell us about stores, because I know that you've started to work with some grocery stores, and I can picture some of our viewers, they're sitting at home right now, and they're like, well, I don't really have a lot of food waste, but I go to the local convenience store every day, and I talk to Bob, the guy behind the counter, and I could tell him about Olio, and he could then put, onto the Olio app some things that are going to go bad by the end, soon. Do stores seem to like this app?
So we have a separate type of volunteer that we call Food Waste Heroes, and they pass a food safety training module on our website, and then confirm they understand the guidelines for safe food sharing, and then that means that they are equipped to help Bob with his problem. Bob at the convenience store, I think you said. So it's unlikely that Bob will himself find time at the end of the day when they're closing up shop and closing the till and everything to share that food. But you know what he'd love is if on your way home every night from work, you stop by and you said, I'll take it off your hands. And by the way, I'm going to share it on this app. I'm only going to keep a little bit for myself. The rest of it, I'm going to make sure it goes to the whole community. And that process, we call those volunteers, we call Food Waste Heroes. And that process is our Food Waste Heroes program. And we have over 6,000 now Food Waste Heroes, fully food safety trained, all around the world, collecting from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of businesses every week. And then they take the food straight home. It's all it's streamlined. If you sign up to become a Food Waste Hero, we help you say, here's what you can go and say to Bob. Here's the frequently asked questions. Well, how do I think about food safety? How do I think about liability? So that you can persuade Bob to let you pick up the food that he's otherwise literally just throwing in the bin.
Now, tell us more about food insecurity and hunger, because I know that, a lot of people who have plenty of food, like you talked about, where, food is cheaper, so they don't even think about it, aren't thinking about what it feels like for families where hunger and food insecurity is an issue. And I'm imagining that there's a whole host of things that happen when food is a big problem in your life, the lack of food, where you're now just spending a lot of your time and energy focused on that problem instead of the things that you should be focused on.
Agreed. And the thing is, it's a very complex and nuanced issue. People often tend to think that the people who are the most in need of food are the homeless. And by homeless, I mean someone who's literally sleeping on the street. And there actually, although there are way too many people who are homeless, there aren't as many as you might think, right? They can't eat all the food that's going to waste at all. They can eat less than 1% of 1% of the food that's going to waste. And often the food is not the thing that they need most, right? So it's not like we have in America or in the UK, quite literally, we don't have sort of starving people living on the streets. We have people who are suffering from unemployment or from mental health issues, or maybe they're in an abusive relationship, etc. And they're often inundated with food. And what they really need help with are access to reskilling, or helping to get, there's all kinds of access to appropriate services, right? So then what you have is the hidden hungry, because those are the visible people who are suffering in our society. And then what you have are the hidden hungry, who we don't see. In the U.S., there are 40 million people living in food poverty. About half of them are living in severe food poverty, which means they're skipping meals on a day. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from, and they're skipping a meal on a daily basis. But they usually have a roof over their head, and they have a smartphone, and they're not necessarily visible to the naked eye, and they just look like a regular everyday person. But behind that, what's happening is they're having to make very difficult trade-offs, usually in family situations where parents are choosing to skip meals to feed their children. And that's heartbreaking, in my opinion, especially when we have more than enough food to go around. To top that off, there's a huge level of shame associated with not being able to provide for your family. The process of asking for a handout, quote unquote, adds a level of additional stress, right? What are other people thinking of me? What's wrong with me? Why can't I, why can't I provide for my family? So that compounds it, and people feel isolated. So whilst our mission is it really is environmental here, right? We're really talking about solving an environmental issue. We are quietly extraordinarily proud of the impact we're having on people's lives who are living in food poverty, who are part of the hidden hungry. And because we know they're getting access to food in a way that doesn't feel like a handout. And we get messages constantly where people say, the best thing about Olio is my dignity was preserved. I'm just, it's anonymous. There's no stigma attached. I didn't have to sort of wait in line, or I'm not part of a quota, or, it's just a part of being a modern conscious consumer and being part of my neighbors.
Can you tell us how many people this app has touched? I mean, because you must have some pretty good data, I'm imagining, from when you started. So first of all, when did this app go live? And how many people have used it since then?
So we went live across the UK. We did a pilot in 2015, and then we went live across the UK at the beginning of 2016, so 4 years ago. It's been a slow build-up. Most people thought we were insane, if I'm honest. We have about 1.7 or so million signed up, onboarded users. And maybe 170,000 people have actually met on the doorstep with another neighbor to share food. I know that we've successfully shared more than 3 million portions of food between neighbors in that time. Right now, at this precise point in time, there's about 12,000 listings on the app. Now, if you open the app, because you're only going to see listings near you, you'll see 0 unless you kindly made one before the show. But in the places where there's lots of listings, we've hit that tipping point. The activity, it's 25% of the people who've signed up to the app are using it every month, if not more.
How can our viewers who are watching now, if they want to help beyond using the app, which is exactly what they should do, but if they want to go above and beyond, if they want to, donate to you or help you or grow the organization, are there any things that our viewers can do to help?
Yes, absolutely. Well, on our website, we've got, there's a lot of resources on our website, okay? So we have a place that's just called Spread the Word. It's just one click to share on Facebook, one click to share on Twitter. Like that all helps. That brings more more people, encourages more people to download the app. Anything you see in the app has a share button. So even if you see something that's, in London, you can share that. Look, in London, someone's giving away a case of wine, someone's giving away some caviar, whatever, something interesting that gets people's attention. On the website, we also have a partner resources page, a school resources page. We have loads of sort of resources pages. For example, the school's resources page, anyone that's in school or has a child in school, there's loads of things that they could do there just to start, like, in terms of mini curriculum kits, right, for teachers, stuff that can help. Because part of this process is long-term and part of it's short-term. Short-term sharing and spreading the word, but long-term is raising a generation of people who don't think it's okay to throw away food.
Now, when you got started doing this in 2015, 2016, did you have any idea that you would have reached this many people by now? Because, you might be thinking, because you're in the trenches every day, that this has been a long, long slog. But from my perspective, it's so short for you to have accomplished so much. How does it feel 3 or 4 years in now to be where you're at?
It's incredibly motivating. I wake up almost every day just feeling, still like pinching myself, like can't believe it's true. I remember when Tess and I first started, we said of course we have to have global ambitions, but reality is if we can just get 10,000 people to sign up to this app and we can all share our food with each other, we'll be pretty happy, because we did face such skepticism in the beginning. So it is, on the one hand, it's incredibly motivating, and I'm really proud of it. I feel a little safer now that we've had so many people. I'm like, okay, actually, we've got something. People are interested. People want to talk to us about it. People want to try something new. It makes me feel really hopeful. On the other hand, it's very frustrating because I can see how far we have to go, right? Like we barely, put a dent in it. But you can't, I think, let that get in the way, or no one would ever do anything. I do feel a sense of impatience with regard to our sort of just global acknowledgement and reckoning of that we have with the climate crisis. Tess and I went and had a lunch with one of the founders of Extinction Rebellion late last year, and there's a lot of, I think we're all sort of in denial about what is going on. We can look at Australia literally on fire and still be in denial about what's going on. So I think there's a lot of complex psychological, like almost grief or things that are going on for most of us about the state of the planet and our impact as humans in that, and what is and is not reversible. On the other hand, I'm a relentless optimist, and I just absolutely wake up every day thinking today's the day that Prince Harry and Leonardo DiCaprio and Oprah Winfrey are all going to say that, hey everyone, I found this great app. If you just use it, and then boom, overnight we've got hundreds of millions of people. Like, Olio's cool. Like, who, I love it when people say I olioed, or I'm olioing, or I'm an olioer, and it's a verb. Then I'm like, so I think that potential to snowball is really exciting.
Tell me about the very first time you've got the app up and running. You're trying to get your local community to use it. How did you get, your neighbors and your neighborhood to start using it?
So the first thing we did is we created a market research survey. We knew we had to start our pilot in a small geographic location to see if it would work within a defined geographic area, because if we did all of London, which is massive, it wouldn't work. So we picked a small corner of North London, and then I tried to get as many people as possible to fill out just a simple survey monkey, which we asked people, how do you feel when you throw away food that is or recently was edible? 35% said they felt physically pained. We also learned that 93%, and I think a good 350 people filled the survey out locally. 93% of people said they'd be willing to walk 10 or 15 minutes to pick up fresh fruit or veg from a neighbor. So we got some really positive data. The question is, of course, will people do what they say? Like, of course, a lot of us say we like to do certain things, but whether or not you actually do it, that's a big difference. So in order to prove that, we did a proof of concept. We took 12 people through the survey who didn't know each other, but who all lived within sort of 1 square mile in London. So that's, most people here bike or walk. And we asked them to participate in a 2-week long, it was very simple. It was a WhatsApp group. Post anything you don't want. If you want something, request it. And during that time, we had 26 shares. The first was a bag of shallots, which I had to look that up. I'm like, what's a shallot? And it just it was really easy. And when we debriefed the participants, they said, oh my God, it was so much fun. I met people that I've been friends with on Twitter or Facebook before, but I never actually met in person. And they also, very importantly, said it really doesn't need to be much better than a WhatsApp group. Like, you don't need to, it's pretty straightforward, which meant we got to significantly scale back the app when we launched it and save ourselves a lot of money in the beginning. Of course, since then we've invested heavily, but it meant we launched with a really lean version of the app. So we did the data. The people who actually used it, and they gave us some feedback. So the next thing we did, because from the day we incorporated the company, like when we came up with the idea, to when we launched in the App Store was exactly 5 months later to the day. We're mothers. We're extraordinarily efficient. So we did what we ask our volunteers to do now. So we printed 10,000 letters that said, "Dear neighbor, my name's Saasha. I'm starting a food sharing revolution. Please go to this website and put in your email address." Distributed 10,000 letters by hand. We put up posters all over the place. The council kept calling us and asking us, telling us, threatening us that they were gonna, fine us or something. They never did. We stood on the street corner with clipboards, and we, for hours and hours and hours, we'd go to the local store. We'd say, "Do you have anything you're not going to sell today?" They give us all this food that was about to be thrown away. We'd stand in front of the tube stations at rush hour, say, "Look at all this food. Want some free food?" People would come over, and we take their name and their email address, and we would ask them, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you about Olio? And if they said 9 or 10, we said, "Will you be a volunteer?" So, cut a long story short, on the day we launched, we had 30 volunteers and a couple thousand email addresses. And it only took a couple weeks, though, before it started we had enough people and enough activity for it to be self-clearing.
As we've been sitting here having this conversation, I'm trying to think about, what can I contribute that I have in my fridge right now? So what are some of the things that people give away? Because, part of me is stuck with this sort of food drive, a can of something, or some kind of packaged something that, will never go bad, in practically what feels like my lifetime, although cans do go bad. What are the things that I could be thinking about giving away if I am I don't know of a recipe that I'm going to be putting them into soon?
So most of the food shared is perishable, and there's loads of fruit and veg that get shared. But most people also start off with that because they're like, I don't have, I'm not just sitting on food I'm not going to eat knowingly, right? I'm still maybe thinking I'm going to have that salad tomorrow when we all know it's, I'm going to have a takeout. But the most people start with just a simple cupboard clear out. So food banks, for example, they won't take, for the most part, at least here in the UK, any open food or food that's past its best before. So whereas on our app, best before is not an indicator of safety, it's simply an indicator of like peak freshness. So most people open the fridge and they're like, oh yeah, I thought I was going to make homemade Moroccan food once and I bought all the spices and I did it once and I'm never going to do that again. And it's opened and you can't take it to the thrift store. You can't take it to a food bank. You're never going to do it again, let's be honest. So oh yeah, I bought some like lemon, loose lemon echinacea tea. Like there's just loads of random things that come about because we get food gifts, we try something experimental, or kids decide they don't like it anymore. And you're like, actually, it's 1 month past its best before, but it's a granola bar. I know it's fine, but you can't take that someplace. So a cupboard clear out is the obvious place to start. The other thing I would mention is that you can share we call it non-food. 80% of our listings are food, and we don't talk about non-food very much, but there are a ton of household things that we have around our house that you don't really want to sell. Or they don't have enough value to sell. Like my friend she came over last night for a cup of tea and she brought like 18 hangers. Someone will come pick those up for me. Someone who lives within a 2-minute walk. Or if you've got disposable diapers and your kid grows you still have half a box left and your kid grows out of that size and you don't have, there's just light bulbs, kitchen equipment, there's loads of consumable. You change your hair color. You don't paint your nails anymore. What do you do with 25 bottles of, neither you guys know, but 25 bottles of open nail polish, It's not worth anything really, but it'd be a shame. You feel ashamed to put it in the bin when someone can go pick that up and maybe give it to their 9 or 10-year-old daughter who's learning to paint their nails for the first time.
And so a lot of the time when I'm doing a refrigerator or a cabinet clean out, there's a lot of just like, ew, like this went bad months ago. Like that's so gross. Obviously we're not giving away that stuff, but the reason that I kept it was I didn't have anyone to give it to. So I was like, well, I can't, what am I going to do? Give it to somebody? No, I'm going to eat that. I swear I'm going to eat that. And then I put a bottle of orange juice in front of it and I can't see it anymore. And then 3 months later, I'm like, what was this? So do you think that having that changed mindset leads to you doing a clear out a little bit more often? Because usually the only place that I'm putting the food that isn't going back in the fridge is in the trash can. And it's so painful most of the time. It's like this miso. Oh, it's still good because it's alive. I have to throw it away. But being able to give it away, you're going to be doing stuff a lot earlier, I feel like, because you're going to be like, there is a second option. It's not going to be this painful throw it in the garbage can unless it looks like some kind of evil alien.
You're absolutely right. And it is, that's why I need to figure out for 2020 a better way to describe the stuff that gets shared on Olio, because it's not food waste. No one's sharing waste. No one's collecting waste. That's gross. It belongs in the bin. What we're doing is doing that mental maths and recognizing, okay, yeah, theoretically, there's a 20% chance I'll eat the miso. It costs $5. It's worth that much to me, $1 to me. I'm gonna give that $1 to someone else. I'm gonna free that miso and that value. Miso is a great example of something that someone buys once or twice. It lasts forever, but it takes up space. Every time you open it, look at it, you just feel responsibility. Right, you're now responsible for that miso, right? So you just you do start thinking earlier, like maybe it's okay if I don't eat the whole bag and I just take what I want and like give it to someone else. I got what I wanted in the first place.
So all of this talk about food and food going to waste harkens me back to a story my grandfather tells me where he didn't finish everything on his plate, and his father said to him, so my great-grandfather said to him, you better eat that. They're starving kids in Africa. And my grandfather said, okay, then why don't you send it to him? And he ended up on the floor. The thought to me, the sad thought, is that there were hungry people probably within my grandfather's neighborhood that could have used that food. And the idea that the starving people were all in Africa, along with all the other problematic parts of that, is that they weren't the only people there. And instead of my grandfather getting hit for talking back to his father, he brought up an excellent point, which was that why should he be eating this food if he's full? And it could go to someone else. And so the question that I have is, what about home-cooked meals? What about meals that you've cooked? You've put them in a Tupperware container. They're definitely good. You're saying...
Absolutely. We have... one of our biggest categories is from home bakers, specifically. Yes, you can put any home-cooked food you want. You can put leftover from your barbecue. You can put that's all certainly not only allowed but encouraged. And we see people, for example, at Christmas, we had a lot of people who said, "I'm going to be cooking a Christmas meal. I'm gonna more than happy to make up to 4 additional place settings if you're not having a home cooked Christmas meal, or even some people said if you're like to join us, let me know." And they put that up in advance, and then someone would reserve a home cooked meal. It can also just be I made too much chili. Help me, please, for eat chili for the next 19 meals. So home-cooked food is absolutely not only allowed but encouraged. Home-baked goods, a lot of people don't want to eat 24 cupcakes just because that's how many the recipe said. And the other thing, just going back to your grandfather's point, though, is there's an excellent book called The Global Food Waste Scandal by Tristram Stewart. If anyone really wants to understand in a pretty accessible way, but how the food waste occurs. The reality is that actually, without getting too deep, and I'll try and do this quickly, it's true that you can't take the food that's on your plate and feed someone hungry thousands of miles away, but by throwing that food away, that means that we buy more food than we needed to in the first place, and a lot of food is exported. So if we're importing food from less developed countries, if you think right, then what happens is if that country doesn't have enough area to grow food to feed their own populations, they're choosing, farmers are obviously making an economic decision, they're choosing to grow food for export that gives them a higher income, then what happens is you actually end up with a shortage of really basic food for native populations, like basic rice and corn and wheat, right? Or what happens is that to meet the demand, even though a third of it is going to waste, let's say for cattle, they're clearing rainforests, or for palm oil, they're clearing palm, So it is all, we have a globalized food supply system. It is all interconnected. Our excess demand drives up the price of food for export unnecessarily, displaces the growth of local food, and encourages, the deforestation and just destruction of natural habitats, which obviously all is interlinked. And I do recommend The Global Food Waste Scandal for anyone who's interested in understanding this more.
Thank you so much for the work that you do. I'm so inspired. I've been, going through the fridge in my head. I definitely have like a thing of milk that I'm definitely not going to be able to go through. So that's definitely something I'm going to want to put on Olio. Thank you so much for joining us today.
In the short term, if you don't have enough people near you, you can just go knock on your neighbor's door and tell them to download Olio.
Wow. So I really did tear up during the interview, especially when you were asking about, can you donate a home-cooked meal? Like, can you put that on the app? And because I was kind of expecting her to say, no, it has to be in plastic wrap. Right. And she's like, no, of course you can. Right. Like, that's what you do with a neighbor. I think the idea here is whatever you would do with your neighbor, right, you would do with the app, because we're trying to get back to a sense of community here. And that's what this app is helping us do. We all live this super hyper busy lives where we try and fit in these little things, and food just goes gets wasted,
right, because it's hard to manage unless you're a chef. You watch chefs on TV and you're just like, wow, their kitchen is beautiful. They have all this beautiful produce and it's all ripe right now. And it's like, that took their whole day. Right. Like that took up that they're a chef. That's their whole job. We have other things to be doing. We have people to look after. We have places to go, and food is a necessity, but it's not like this thing that we can just devote all of our time to. And so therefore it falls by the wayside. And a lot of leftovers that I make get completely wasted. I'm practically like, do I want to even keep this Tupperware?
But here's the thing. I don't want people to look to Olio like I did in the beginning as the only answer. I don't want them to say, well, it's not my area, so screw it. I want you to look at this app as, hey, they've already developed this thing that works. So if it's not in your area, yes, it'll take a little bit of work to get it, but I don't think it's that hard. After talking with Saasha, you realize that you have institutions in your neighborhood. You have schools and churches and food banks and grocery stores and places you can go to just jumpstart support this. Also, you have Facebook and things like that where you can just get, I bet you could get dozens of friends on it in a day.
Right. Yeah, and keep in mind that you have friends that you know in your area. They might not be people that you want to interact with all the time. That's fine, right? But if they have an extra loaf of bread or they've just cooked a meal and you're like, should we get takeout tonight? And you're like, oh, let me just check Olio. Oh, someone just made some delicious food. What a wonderful way to both reduce food waste, save the entire environment, and potentially help people who are the hidden hungry. Saasha and the team at Olio were going after one problem, right? They were going after climate emissions due to wasted food. But in the process, they're also solving so many other problems.
Right. Unintended consequences in a good way.
Right. And when you aim to do the right thing, you end up doing a lot of other positive things. And that's the thing that's the part of this that I really, really like, is that it's not just going after one issue. It's not just a charity. This is a smart thing to be doing from a global perspective. And to see all the different impacts. I mean, we got pretty deep into some of those topics, and the oversupply of food that we have in a lot of these countries means that there is a undersupply of food in other countries where we're getting our food from. It's just like, oh. And I go back to the example of my grandfather telling me this story about his father hitting him because he was
that was the easy answer back then. It was like, if there's no food on your plate at the end of the meal, then I can feel good. Then I can feel like
that there was no food waste.
I did my job as a parent.
And the problem with that is if you extend that forward to where we definitely have enough food, this isn't the Depression anymore. It tends towards obesity. It tends towards this very selfish perspective of like, if this food doesn't go into my belly, then it should be thrown away. Right. And just like electric cars, just like solar, I think once you actually start to dive into this topic, it's going to really change your mind about how you think about the world, because it's such a pivotal thing to be thinking about.
That's a really good point. I mean, the whole reason why we do this channel is to get people thinking about how they can make a more sustainable world. And we're kind of going at it from sustainable energy to get you butts and seats into an electric car, which we think then gets you to start thinking about solar and so forth. But this app, to be honest, is another whole way. If you're not interested, maybe you're never going to get in a car at all.
And maybe you don't want to go vegan.
Right. This is a way to keep your existing lifestyle, but just change your mentality a little bit about your community. And then, a little, you heard it throughout the interview, it feels so good to exchange things with your neighbor.
Right.
It just makes your stress levels go down. It makes you feel like you're part of a community.
Right. So, I mean, I live right next to my best friend. It was not by accident we made that happen. But we're able to share so many things between appliances and like, hey, do you have any oregano? Hey, do you have any olive oil? It's like being able to have that and not just being like, oh, I have to like get fully dressed. I have to go to the store. I have to get the bags. I have to go to the thing and pay for the thing. And it's like when not more than like 30 feet from me is exactly what I need. I'm so happy that this exists because it makes so much sense.
And speaking of community, the whole reason we got to meet Saasha was because of one of you. One of our Patreons reached out to us and said, hey, I know this amazing person. Would you like to talk to her? That is how this is so amazing. Like, you guys are part of this. We wouldn't know how to reach out to Saasha. I didn't know about the app.
Right.
She's on the other side of the world. So you guys talking to us and making us kind of the clearinghouse for all this information is what makes this community so powerful.
Just in case you haven't done it already, go download the Olio app. Even if there's no one else around you. Hey, fun thing, you might bump into another fan of this show who lives near you that you would have never met otherwise.
True.
Just because you're both on the Olio app. I don't know. What a fun story that would be. I encourage you to tell us about it if that happens.
Thanks so much for watching, everybody.
Now you know.